morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us today. I'm the moderator, Gwen Robinson, from the editor-at-large at Nikkei Asian Review and a senior fellow at the Institute of Security and International Studies at Chulalongkorn University. And we're here today for our forum, the Dream Thailand Public Forum on the Free and Open Indo-Pacific and ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, Drivers, Dynamics and Prospects. I'd just like to, first of all, introduce Dr. Ake Tangsupvattana, Dean of the Faculty of Political Science at Chulalongkorn University, to make some welcome remarks.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, colleagues and students here, good morning. I have a pleasure of opening this ISIS Public Forum on the free and open Indo-Pacific and ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, drivers, dynamics and prospects. This forum is sponsored by the Dream Thailand project by the Frederick Naumann Foundation. So thank you for the FNS for your sustained support. We have a robust turnout today, even more than what the organizer have anticipated. Part of it is because the growing interest and concern in and about the world around us. The global order is facing more and more challenges. There have been many more questions than there are answers. This is the context of our seminar this morning. As you know, the Indo-Pacific is fast becoming the new geographic frame of reference for the geographical and geo-economic dynamics in what used to be called the Asia-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific, sometimes formerly known as the United States Different Free and Open Indo-Pacific, or the FOIP, has brought about mixed reactions around the region. Part from the US and FOIP also includes Australia, India, and Japan. Together, those four Indo-Pacific promoters are known as Quad. As they have realized the FOIP's powerful drivers and staying power, ASEAN's member states have responded with the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, or the AOIP, as a way of reasserting and maintaining ASEAN's central role and function in regional affairs, navigating the ongoing and intensifying tension between the US and China. The AOIP also has come under scrutiny. Some see it as an effective and useful response, while others view it as an empty and rhetorical. We will attempt to shed some light on this debate. Overall, this forum will examine the underpinnings and motivation of FOIP and AOIP, with implications for broader dynamics such as China's Belt and Road Initiative and other regional endeavors, such as the Irrawaddy Chao Mae Khong Economic Cooperation Strategy. In addition, we will also cover Thailand's role as ASEAN chair. The speakers at this forum are drawn from Chulalongkorn University scholarly and academic community. In fact, I take a pride in noting that all four speakers and the moderator are all affiliated with ISIS and the Faculty of Political Science. First, Dr. Kasira Cheeppensook, Deputy Dean for International Affairs and Graduate Study, and Dr. Pongphisoot Busbarat, Lecturer of International Relations, Kun Gwen Robinson, Senior Fellow of ISIS Thailand and the Editor-at-Large of the Nikkei ASEAN Review. Kavi Chongkittavorn, Senior Fellows of ISIS Thailand, and the former Chief Editor of the Myanmar Times. And last but not least, Ajahn Thitinan, who transformed himself from the moderator to be a speaker today, the Director of the ISIS Thailand. Usually we have some external experts to join our forums, but this time they are all internal, and I thank all of them. I hope you will enjoy this discussion, and let me return the floor back to Kun Gwen, and thank you.
This is an internal set of excellent speakers, and I hope therefore that we can make it a little more informal and get to the real nub of some of these questions, and hopefully there will be some time for questions afterwards. So please, if you do have issues you'd like to raise, there will be time at the end. And before we turn to the discussions, I'd just like to say, as both an academic, well, as a researcher and a journalist, I've pored over the various comparisons of the Free and Open Indo-Pacific and the Belt and Road Initiative, which has been driving a lot of people crazy since the US came out with the Free and Open Indo-Pacific as a concept, and has lately begun adding a lot of financial muscle behind it. So now we're seeing all these offshoots, and ASEAN's move to set up AOIP has further complicated it for researchers in this region who are really trying to compare very different creatures, FOIP and AOIP and BRI. So I think this is one of the real problems vexing analysts and academics who are surveying the region. So I think we'll be very interested to see what our panelists can bring on this question. So I'd first like to turn to Dr. Kasira, over to you, and maybe you can shed some light on the comparisons and the issues that we should be considering in these different phenomena that are now taking hold in the region.
Thank you very much, Gwen, and I'd like to thank ISIS as well for allowing me to present my thoughts in this panel. So I think I'll be brief. Actually, my talks will focus on the AOIP with also special reference to Thai chairmanship. So as you already know, I mean, I will not go too much in detail on the origins or the construction of the initiative itself, but just a brief overview is that the main initiative for drafting the ASEAN vision of the Indo-Pacific was taken by Indonesia, then discussed more during the SOM in Thailand, and the outcome adopted at the recent ASEAN summit. So when we look at the AOIP, it's actually essentially ASEAN-centered attempt at regional architecture. So it reinforces ASEAN centrality. It's very crucial for ASEAN to also have its vision, which reinforces ASEAN values and its roles as being the driver, and to ensure that it still remains in the driver's seats for regional architecture for days to come. So the AOIP actually tries to enhance ASEAN's community building process as well, without creating any new mechanism. So it's nothing to actually be a mechanism in its own. It just tried to implement one of the Thailand's visions in becoming the ASEAN chair, as well in actually trying to strengthen the complementarities of ASEAN to the existing mechanism. So now we actually, for the AOIP, it tries to give some new weight, momentum, if you want to use the vocab, the term in AOIP, for existing ASEAN-led mechanisms, such as the EAS, the ARF, the ADMM+, and the AP1, which is like ASEAN +1. So all of these existing forums, existing mechanisms, should all now have a kind of cohesive vision which exists in the AOIP. So the AOIP does not aim to create any more mechanisms to actually drive the vision forward. So it tries to foster dialogue even more, focus on development, and there are 4 areas, as you might have already seen from the document. Maritime cooperation, focusing on blue economy as well, connectivity, the SDGs, and economic prosperity. So these are 4 areas focused on in the AOIP. And when you look at the ASEAN, Thai chairmanship of ASEAN, and its main, it called this priority deliverables, it fits together really nicely. It's actually what Thailand has set for its chairmanship already, and it's all laid out in the main areas of cooperation in the AOIP. So all in all, the AOIP also aims to try to address common challenges arisen from the all areas of the main focus of cooperation. It aims to even have ASEAN operate under a kind of rules-based community. And so it really stress on the respect for international law and the TAC as well, which is the ASEAN value. So next, I look at how consistent the OIP is with the main priority deliverables Thailand has actually set for its chairmanship. So the first area, marine cooperation. The summit, when it adopted the AOIP, also adopted the Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris in the ASEAN region. So you'll see that marine cooperation extends to a very, very broad area or issues in a sense. It's just not the maritime exercise or look towards how to deal with the conflicts in South China Sea, how to prevent, the threats for freedom of navigation, but actually to the marine ecology as a whole, and to actually aims as the coastal ecosystem as well. And this links to the next area, which is the connectivity. So as you know, when Thailand assumed the chairmanship from Singapore, it actually focused a lot on highlighting the Impact 2025, which is the master plan for ASEAN connectivity. So Thailand really highlighted this, and the AOIP aims to build synergies with other connectivity plans, such as the BRI, using the concept, they call this connecting the connectivities. So the existing connectivity plan is be looked towards how that it can be linked to the plan that ASEAN has already had in place, which is the Impact 2025, how it can be linked to the ASEAN Highway Network. This is how Thailand thinks that ASEAN should actually progress, and how it could also be linked not only in the Pacific Ocean, right, but also to the Indian Ocean, such as the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or the IORA, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or the BIMSTEC, and the Mekong Sub-Regional Cooperation back to the Pacific Ocean as well. So you'll see that these kind of existing forums, existing mechanisms, as I said, including the ASEAN Maritime Forum, is now envisioned as a kind of streamlined parts of this connectivity of the AOIP as well. So these areas of cooperation really link together: maritime cooperation, maritime safety, and connectivity. And so the ASEAN Maritime Forum is envisioned to also complement the IORA's agenda in maritime cooperation as well. So you see that for the impact to also succeed, it also has this important element of maritime cooperation really inform the framework. Next is the SDGs. So you know that even before Thailand assumed its chairmanship, it's actually focused a lot on the SEP for SDGs, which is pushing for sufficient economy philosophy to complement or achieve their sustainable development goals. So Thailand has been promoting this SEP in broader forums such as the UN, or when it was the chair of the G77, right? And what it has already done during its chairmanship is to create the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue to actually study more about how the successful model of the SEP for SDGs can also be used in other countries, other neighboring countries. You'll see as well here the complementarities that Thai as ASEAN chair aim to achieve between ASEAN Vision 2025 and the UN 2030 agenda. So the keyword here is how to actually create some synergies, complementarities with the existing plans and mechanisms within, under the cohesive framework now of the vision of the AOIP. And the four main areas of cooperation, the economy. And you've already known that Thailand has been trying to achieve the RCEP finalization within November, and preferably within the time that Thailand is still chair. Right? So right now, Thailand actually tried to push for other bilateral negotiations as well in order to be able to finish the talks by November and to actually facilitate the RCEP as a whole, framework as a whole. So it now holds some bilateral negotiations with India, Japan, New Zealand to kind of negotiate over the leftover issues from the previous talks. So for the economy, we have seen the other kind of integration initiative as well, that ASEAN, Thailand as chair set as its priority deliverables, such as ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan, ASEAN Innovation Roadmap, and Thailand as ASEAN chair actually envisioned this as a tool in preventive diplomacy. So AOIP can also be seen in that light. So now I think that the main takeaways that you get from the Thai chairmanship and the AOIP is that how ASEAN can still be relevant in strategic environment right now in the complexity of the security and strategic environment. You've seen US-China competitiveness, trade war as well. You've seen the Quad environment, right, between India, Japan, US, Australia, the quadrilateral security dialogue. And ASEAN does not want to be relevant or left out of all these dialogues and the those elements that create the complexity of security and strategic environment right now. So that the agenda to drive ASEAN's centrality, the agenda that is most relevant to ASEAN and to ASEAN's common interest will not be dominated by external powers, meaning external powers from outside us and non-ASEAN members. So ASEAN still want to really kind of have a say in the security agenda. And so even though the tone in the AOIP, if you look at it, is not overtly strategic in any way, it tries to be more inclusive and tries to balance away a bit the exclusiveness of some of the dialogue that happens, that is the trend. So the question now, if I might quote the late Dr. Sarin in 2011, is we have aimed for ASEAN centrality for quite some time now, and the AOIP also tries to strengthen the ASEAN centrality to have ASEAN become relevant, but ASEAN has relied a lot on ASEAN centrality of goodwill, if I may quote him. And how can ASEAN achieve the centrality of substance instead? Not only for the goodwill that it's an accommodating, talking environment, but also provide some kind of cohesiveness, to make sure that ASEAN is not divided ever again from security agendas or challenges in the past, such as the South China Sea. So in this regard, you'll see that the vision, the AOIP actually has roots in, well, it's just not just something that has been thought of in a few years, few past years, really. But when you look back, even in the 2010s, around 2010 or 2011, you've seen the foreign minister of Indonesia, Natalegawa Gava, at that time, has also publicly raised the prospect of Indo-Pacific Friendship and Cooperation Treaty. So it has developed and it has resulted in the vision of the AOIP. So it has been something that ASEAN as a region has been thinking for quite some time as well. Second main takeaway, I think, is AOIP is actually an exercise in value commitment or even reiteration of values that ASEAN wants to expose to the world, that this is how ASEAN is operating. I mean, when you look to the codifications of ASEAN norms, you might look to the ASEAN Charter, but the AOIP is even, it will be more embedded in the international norms recognized by international community. So when you compare the FOIP to the AOIP, the terms they use are the same. I mean, the values they commit to are very, very similar. So they use the words like freedom of navigation, the rule of law, freedom from coercion, respect for sovereignty, open markets, freedom and independence. I mean, these are these norms that embedded in the FOIP. They're also reiterated in AOIP. So it's very interesting to see that China is not really offended by the AOIP, but it's really thinks of the FOIP as targeted at them. So this is the value added from ASEAN as well, that even though the norms, the international norms recognized are quite the same, the FOIP and AOIP, it managed to be more inclusive and to becoming a reassuring kind of mechanism, even though it's not a mechanism itself, but it's a reassurance tools, and try to keep the channel of communication open by not alienating China like the FOIP has done in the past. So when I just looked at the Department of Defense, the U.S. Department of Defense Indo-Pacific Strategy Report, just issued in June 2019, right? Which embedded and encompassed the FOIP. And it's, the language is quite clear, actually. It's even mentioned the People's Republic of China in its like opening remarks. So in the Department of Defense Indo-Pacific Strategy Report, it states that the interstate strategy competition, defined now by geopolitical rivalry between free and repressive world order visions, is a primary concern for U.S. national security. In particular, the People's Republic of China, under the leadership of Chinese Communist Party, seek to reorder the region to its advantage by leveraging military modernization, etc. So you see this kind of aggressive language that stems a bit from the vision of the FOIP, which would not happen, and ASEAN try to prevent from happening in ASEAN, so that it can be more inclusive to China as well. So it tries to, the LIP and ASEAN try not to single out any country, like the documents might stem from the FOIP. So this is the added value of the AOIP as well. Third main takeaways, it actually, I mean, the AOIP opens up opportunities for partners, or some analysts might say it's remained a bit dormant in the past, like India to also step up under this framework. So you see just now, the first ever Singapore, India, Thailand maritime exercise, or SITMEX, is first trilateral maritime cooperation, which I think will end tomorrow. So this is another attempt to link the Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean together in the main area of maritime cooperation. So you see from the AOIP, it opens up a lot of opportunities for the partners to also be creative, to also do something like the trilateral exercise that might not happen in the past. I mean, I'm not saying that this can't happen without the AOIP, but with the framework for AOIP, it's actually a kind of inclusive vision of the partners in the Indian and Pacific Ocean to really tackle common challenges together without the threats that it's, that the ASEAN has to blame that it can do this with someone being repressive and someone has to be free. This kind of language is not really inclusive in the ASEAN's eyes. And we also see the network of partnerships that stem from the OIP framework in other areas of cooperation as well, such as the Blue Carbon Initiative and the Blue Carbon Action Plan envisioned by China. So China pays a lot of attention on blue carbon right now, which is what ASEAN tries to also do in developing and protecting the coastal marine ecosystem, because actually the coastal ecosystem is very important in absorbing the carbon as well. So we call that blue carbon. So if this is threatened, the coastal maritime ecosystem is destroyed, right? The carbon will also be emitted back to the atmosphere. And this is like the common threats of both Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean that can also be tackling together. And this is like the areas that OIP also can foster in the future. So I think I'll stop here now first, but I think the AOIP, by being a kind of ASEAN version of Indo-Pacific, but it's not just something that, I mean, ASEAN is very, very careful to be clear that it's not a response to the FOIP per se. This is what ASEAN has been doing for quite some time, but then adopted at this, the summit when it's ready, and it's not a kind of any binding mechanism, but it's a kind of cohesive vision framework that ASEAN can proceed and linking the connectivity between the Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dr. Kasira, for a wow, that adds even more layers to the challenge of comparing and contrasting this network of mechanisms and frameworks that we're dealing with here. I think, as you say, I mean, vision is one thing that you can say the ASEAN has tried to come up with, but reality is something else. So perhaps, Dr. Pongphisoot, over to you. You know, is AOIP really a meaningful concept or vision framework? I'll leave that to you. Is your microphone working?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gwen. I have a PowerPoint
great.
slide. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Thitinan and ISIS Thailand for inviting me to share the thought about the FOIP and AOIP with all panelists here. As we know that the Trump administration this one's fine. As we know that the Trump administration slowly replaced the term Asia-Pacific with Indo-Pacific. Sorry, I didn't mention about my focus today. I'm going to talk, in general about how FOIP actually attracts more enmeshment of the stakeholders in the region, especially in mainland Southeast Asia. So I'm going to give you a look, and probably is continuation from Dr. Kasira's remarks on more cooperation between ASEAN and other regional stakeholders in these regions. So as we know, the Trump administration slowly replaced the term Asia-Pacific with Indo-Pacific. So this change actually reflects American response to China's assertive role across Asia and Europe through its push for the Belt and Road Initiative. Right? It signifies actually U.S. approach in managing the rise of China has changed from engaging China into a regional order to limiting China's gain or even containing its rise to global power. So this can intensify power competition across Asia and increasing balancing behavior across Eurasia. Southeast Asia is one of the most important regions that deeply embedded in American-led liberal order. While increasingly engaging with China since the end of the Cold War, will definitely be affected by this Sino-American competition. So ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific is another manifestation of ASEAN's attempt to manage this power competition in the region. So if you see ASEAN outlook or AOIP, we should see that the emphasis is placed on maritime domain, right, as a key element in the involving regional architecture. This reflects an overlapping interest between U.S. and ASEAN, as well as other stakeholders in the regions. To start with, U.S. is a maritime power, right? Its military presence in the regions relies on access to bases and ports across the regions. So therefore, maritime security, open access to sea lane, and freedom of navigation in the regions is important to U.S. presence here. So we know that there are maritime disputes, right, in South China Sea, in East China Sea, as well as the importance of the Indian Ocean to China BRI and U.S. access to the Middle East. So U.S. security role in these regions is viewed throughout this context of Indo-Pacific by many states and regions as a balancing element to potential disruptions in these regions. So I think the issue of maritime domain has been widely discussed. So I'm going to focus mainly on mainland Southeast Asia, and this is like another flip side of the FOIP and AOIP. What I'm trying to suggest, what I'm trying to suggest here is that FOIP has intensified regional stakeholders' involvement in the region. In fact, it's not only maritime, but mainland Southeast Asia where you may be able to see or observe the renewable, deepening interactions of multiple regional stakeholders. First, we look at China, right? China has been at the forefront in this enterprise. In mainland Southeast Asia, China has been relatively successful in consolidating its regional leadership through building competing regional institutions. Yes, I'm talking about the LMC, the Lanchang Mekong Cooperation. Even though LMC actually was started earlier than the American concept of FOIP, the concept itself further, like FOIP actually further China's attempt to consolidate this leadership. Regarding this issue, actually I have a chance to share and discuss with my Chinese counterpart a while ago, and he actually said that actually LMC was initiated by Chinese as the balancing act against the intensifying tensions in South China Sea in around 2012, 2013, and these importance of LMC should be watered down, throughout these ASEAN and China negotiation on the COC, and the tension probably has been moderated. But I think LMC has even become more important to Beijing's in foreign policies at this time in the context of the strong push from America to push for FOIP, right? It's Beijing's venue to maintain its regional influence. We can observe what China thinks intended to do in LMC in last year during the foreign ministerial meeting in Luang Prabang of the LMC meeting. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stipulated that in the current international situation, unstable and uncertain factors are on the rise, and unilateralisms and protectionisms are impacting international rules. The new situation brings about new challenges. He addressed directly to the Americans' foreign policies in these forums. Right? And then he called for LMC to open and deepen partnership and adhere to the principle of tapping into complementary advantages, seeking mutual benefit and reciprocity so as to jointly build the LMC economic development belt. So now, many projects and initiatives under LMC continue with frequencies and strengths. The plan of actions that has been agreed upon a few years ago is reviewed every year, right, during the foreign ministerial meetings. So the outcome of the future plans would be submitted to the summit in the following year, the leader summit in the following years. So Wang Yi also praised during the Luang Prabang meeting that the minister agreed that the cooperation conducted among members has been rapid and notable achievements over the past year. So, of course, China political leverage in mainland Southeast Asia and financial commitment to the projects under LMC umbrella helps make them proceed very rapidly. The project include, building connectivities, infrastructure, water resource management, etc., etc. So in response to China's active role in mainland Southeast Asia, especially through LMC, we have seen Americans' renewed interest in the Trump administration's to use Lower Mekong Initiative as another tool. This can be seen clearly from the remarks of the U.S. Secretary of State during LMI meeting in August this year in Bangkok. Right? Mike Pompeo stressed U.S. commitment to play a positive role in Mekong region, especially through LMI, ranging from teaching English, developing clean drinking water, improving sanitation, improving infrastructure sustainability. So however, he stated that there are troubling trends in these Mekong sub-regions caused by China. So he clearly identified China as a troublemaker in these regions through dam building, blasting riverbeds, extra territorial patrolling and trying to write a new rule to govern the river. So Mike Pompeo announced that U.S. together with his partner will roll out some of the project and activities under the LMI. U.S. going to provide $14 million on the assistance to Mekong countries to counter transnational crime and trafficking. Together with Japan, also develop regional electricity grid with the initial fund of the around $30 million, and it will hold Indo-Pacific Conference on strengthening rule-based governance of transboundary river end of this year. And together with Korea, the U.S. is funding new projects on satellite imagery more effectively to assess Mekong flood and drought pattern. It will also support new Mekong water data sharing platform and a new LMI public impact program. U.S. also pledged support to the revitalizations of ACMEC strategy in these sub-regions. Therefore, we can see more importance of mainland Southeast Asia within the U.S. FOIP this time, right? And this rapid development in LMC and the regional has other regional repercussions in the sense that it stimulates more active roles among other U.S. allies and regional stakeholders. It is not new that regional stakeholders involved to offer assistance and cooperation with Southeast Asian country. However, this round of renewed interest is actually ignited by the U.S. push for the Indo-Pacific strategy. So Japan is another example. An important actor that apparently reframed its commitment to mainland Southeast Asia through the Mekong-Japan cooperation. So the recent ministerial meeting on the 3rd of August this year in Bangkok demonstrate this relationship between the concept of FOIP and Japanese foreign policy. The foreign minister of Japan emphasized the cooperation under Japan-Mekong cooperation will focus on 3 important objectives based on Tokyo's strategy in 2018, right? The first strategy is to realize the sustainable development goals, focusing on the addressing water-related issues in the Mekong Basin, and will cooperate more with the Mekong River Commissions. And the second goal is to realize the FOIP directly, right? Japan praised ASEAN OIP that reaffirm ASEAN principles such as inclusiveness, transparency, as well as other objectives that has a common approach to cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan also clearly suggests that Mekong region is an important link between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Oceans and has a geographical advantage of receiving considerable benefit from realizations of the FOIP. And Japan also wants to promote regional connectivity, peace, and stability in this regard. It mentions about the problem in North Korea, in human rights in Myanmar, and South China Sea conflict. Japan, interestingly, also emphasized the value of ACMEC as a regional synergy within Japan-Mekong cooperation. So it shows Japan's commitment to existing regional arrangements and demonstrate that Japan wants to maintain its traditional approach to cooperation in Southeast Asia, especially supporting regional actors to play a role and share responsibilities. Not only Japan, but we also, another important stakeholder in the region nations, trying to engage more with mainland Southeast Asia, that is from Korea, through the Mekong Rock Cooperation, which is situated within Korea's New Southern policy. And this New Southern policy is largely an economic undertaking that aims to promote Korea's economic interest in Southeast Asia, which is understandable that a lot of investment from Korea in mainland Southeast Asia, especially in Vietnam. Although Korea has been relatively reluctant to refer to FOIP in general in its foreign policy, but recent statement after the bilateral meeting between Trump and President Moon Jae-in in June this year, President Moon Jae-in stated directly that Korea agreed to put forth harmonious cooperation between the New Southern policy and U.S. FOIP. So therefore, Mekong Rock cooperation also reflects this nature and is in line with the U.S. move within the LMI, as well as mentioned earlier that it has like some kind of cooperative project within LMI with Korea. So Southeast Asia place in Korea's foreign policy is that the region provide an alternative to Korea FDI as a hedge against the impact of potential tension between Korea and China, as we see during the 2006 when Korea accepted the THAAD, defense missile installation from the U.S. and the economic tension between Korea and China has been quite intense during that time. So for this reason, economic interest in Southeast Asia to Korea is real. FOIP in its essence promotes openness and inclusiveness in the region, which in turn benefit Korea's investment, and cooperation with the U.S. under LMI that I mentioned earlier can suggest this trend in Korea engagement with Southeast Asia, and especially mainland part. And interestingly, it also highlights the importance of the ACMEC in this Korea Mekong cooperation, and one which is similar to the strategy that U.S. and Japan also pursue. That ACMEC could be the sub-regional framework for streamlining their cooperation with the whole sub-regional states. So these are only examples we have seen in mainland Southeast Asia that regional stakeholders trying to intensify its cooperation to engage more with mainland Southeast Asia. We see other stakeholders as well in India through its Look East policy and BIMSTEC that Dr. Kasira mentioned earlier, and Australia, another important partner to the region. So this comes to my last issue that I want to mention here. So we see ACMEC has been reinvigorated. ACMEC was initiated to remind you or to recall you how it started by Thailand during the Thaksin administration. So initially aimed at promoting economic development within CLMV countries by using Thailand as the main thrust. Right. I won't go into detail what it actually entails. ACMEC is actually in line with Thailand's traditional foreign policy posture that focus on mainland Southeast Asia, demonstrate political willingness to play a leading role in this sub-region, and economic cooperation has been the main policy strategy within this kind of overall foreign policy strategy. So ACMEC, however, was downplayed after the fall of Thaksin premiership, and it comes with Thailand's inability to play a full leading role within ASEAN in the middle of political crisis in the past decade, and this leaves the leadership vacuum in which China have been able to fill. As we see during the establishment of LMC, Lanchang Mekong Cooperation, so China can take this scene from the traditional regional arrangements in mainland Southeast Asia. So it was an alarming sign for Thailand's traditional role in these sub-regions, and therefore, I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been trying to dust off, ACMEC as a new strategy to create a more effective coordination among Mekong sub-regional countries as well as among stakeholders. So within this context, we may see the name of ACMEC, across, different cooperation between ASEAN, especially mainland Southeast Asia, and other regional stakeholders. We see it we see ACMEC's name in LMI. We see in Japan Mekong cooperation, in Korea Mekong cooperations, and etc. etc. So the importance of ACMEC to Thai foreign policy is prominent. So I'll take it to conclusions. What I have trying to show you is that the dynamic in mainland Southeast Asia is, that there are a lot of stakeholders trying to engage with the mainland Southeast Asia within the context of U.S.-China competition. That we see FOIP becomes a policy response to manage China's rise and Southeast Asia in the middle of these Indo-Pacific regions, and inevitably becomes a focal point in this strategy. So FOIP impact not only maritime, but also mainland Southeast Asia. For ASEAN as a whole, it prompts ASEAN to show its positions, right? Hence, ability to maintain its relevant and regional centralities within this regional architecture through the issuance of AOIP. So for mainland Southeast Asia, we see an emerging trend that I have outlined to you in the past 20 minutes that reflects what FOIP and AOIP actually envision, that is, countries in the sub-regions adhere to supporting cooperation and dialogue for development and prosperity, and explore the potential synergies with sub-regional framework. Importantly, FOIP creates an environment, in my conclusion, where Southeast Asia attracts regional stakeholders to deepen their engagement with the region. This trend may be seen as a reverse direction of enmeshment strategy pursued by Southeast Asia, especially since the end of the Cold War. Enmeshment strategy, if I ask students and scholars would be recalled, it refers to the act of engaging with state to increase their involvement in the regional order. It focused on the act done by Southeast Asian state. Right. But reverse enmeshment in this context signifies the efforts of external stakeholders to engage back with Southeast Asia. So this is merely a theoretical debate in the Southeast Asian strategy in the evolving regional architecture. If these developments is actually start to take place. So I'll stop here, and we might have more time to discuss on this kind of issues. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Pongphisoot. That was an excellent. I can see, even with the first two speakers, we're getting a broadening and deepening of perceptions about how this AOIP and FOIP visions are playing out in the region. But I think most of all, what's so interesting is the spotlight you put on the lower Lanchang Mekong cooperation initiative or mechanism, which is Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, Thailand, plus China. And I think the advent of LMC really does say, that it is completely unique. There's no other part of China's BRI that is so focused on specifically in a region. And I know, Kavi, you've got your backyard theory about how, a front yard rather, of how and why China's put so much into LMC. But also I think in the overall context, we are sitting in the middle of a very specific region here, Mekong, where everything we're talking about is playing out at the moment. All these offshoots that are coming out of FOIP and now the ASEAN AOIP, including the many aspects of mini-lateralism. We're seeing a whole bunch of things like ACMEX and the US-initiated Lower Mekong Initiative, just to add complications. So we've got a real alphabet soup in the Mekong region. So, Kavi, over to you, and your thoughts, please.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank ISIS for the invitations. I have 3 points. The first point, I think the first two Thais, Dr. Kasira and Pongphisoot have said. I will, as a journalist, give one headline. Thailand is back after 5 years in the freezer. Dr. Pongphisoot didn't want to say that, but he exactly said that Thailand is playing a leading role. And Dr. Kasira also say in a very wise way that Thailand is behind the so-called ASEAN outlook. But I want to give you a little bit more, that the timing, the Thai chair, and all the whole shebang of all this Thai foreign policy put together allow the birth of ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Don't make mistake. It will never happen the year before or the year after. It will only happen this year and at this particular moment because of conversions of many factors. Last year, the idea was out. Kasira said that even 2010, when Dr. Natalie Gawa has mentioned this in CSIS, ASEAN did not buy it because he proposed the idea in Washington. And then it was brought back by the discussion between Thailand and Indonesia. Why it didn't happen last year, even the idea was long ago? Well, I didn't want to tell you the truth, but I would say that it's very difficult for Indonesia as the big brother of ASEAN to work with one of the most advanced, richest country in Southeast Asia, Singapore. You have to remember in 2010, Indonesia rejected ASEAN plus 8 as the formula of the expansion of EAS. Dr. Natalie Gawa support the EAS plus 2. So that was a small battle that people inside ASEAN will recognize that that was the first time Singapore was defeated. So I just want to give you this a little bit point. Now, coming back to Thailand, I think you have not given enough credit to Thai chair for bringing out the outlook. Because 2 weeks before the outlook came out, there were news that it would be aborted because the disagreement between Cambodia and Singapore. It took the Thai diplomatic finesse and the willingness of other ASEAN countries to work together, that this is the time, because one of the components of ASEAN is that you have to speak in one voice. If the outlook could not come out at this time, I think the whole Thai chair would be kaput. So luckily it came out in the last minute. People were so surprised, and Gwen will always, say that this is a 7-11 version of ASEAN Indo-Pacific because it's included everything. Of course it must include everything. If not, why is ASEAN for? ASEAN is in the middle. And now, luckily with the ASEAN outlook, every country, I mentioned to you, every country, even beyond the so-called dialogue partner, even though ASEAN is aimed at dialogue partner, to engage them. Otherwise, if you don't have your own guideline, your own ASEAN outlook, you have a problem. ASEAN, the issue that ASEAN have to choose side, you have to choose whether it's Indian version or the Japanese versions, the American version, not to mention the French version. The point here is ASEAN has its own and it's good. Now, you have to give credit to the Thai chair. I said again, it will not happen before or even next year. It happened now and it will move on. Now this is the platform to engage ASEAN, to make ASEAN centrality relevant. Of course, people always complain about ASEAN centrality, you have to earn it. We earn it. But from now on, ASEAN has to prove. And you will see some changes in ASEAN's behavior in engaging the major powers this year. Now, the second point that Gwen asked me, the attitude of China toward all this AOIP. I must say that China did not provide a kind of support that ASEAN deserved. It was unfortunate because it will backfire on China. Because ASEAN has taken very long time to devise a guideline that would be inclusive. This is why if you go through the outlook of ASEAN, Indo-Pacific, you will see that paragraph on the principle, it's encompassed every single element of regional and international rule base. I count altogether 12 of them. It's too much. You know, you go nuts. This is why it's 7-11. It should be 7-12. But the point here is we include all the rule-based, but like one thing, Dr. Kasira, ASEAN actually still could not accept freedom. Our Vietnamese friends and other countries, as you read carefully, the word freedom is not there. And we support every principle because freedom has a very wide broad, you know, it's a value things that ASEAN still reluctant. Of course, ASEAN is still continue the true traditional role that is norm setting. We have done that well. We have SOFAN, you have Treaty of Amity, you have Sean Face, and now with Outlook. I think that is the best that ASEAN has come. And the other next best thing is contained inside the Outlook. A lot of people did not mention the relevancies of the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. And now we have around 38 signatories that cover all the geographical region in the world. That signifies that ASEAN would like to promote this regional code of conduct into much more an international universal norm. But of course, people will laugh at it. You know, how ASEAN, you know, non-military grouping, you know, not even NATO or something, can impose on regional code of conduct. I think it can. It just takes a long time. As you can see, ASEAN now would like to promote the Treaty of Amity as the international code of conduct. You will see more and more countries of late, several Middle East countries finally realize that, hey, you know, we better follow some of the ASEAN good practices, you know, make peace, not war, you know, talk a lot, you know, and that is, I think, something new. Now, back to China. I think China still misunderstands the notion because China, and even also I have to mention Russia as well, because at the ASEAN ministerial meeting, Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov left after the first and a half. And he did not like Indo-Pacific. He didn't say much. China said a lot. And I think China, because of the good relation with Thailand, Foreign Minister Wang Yi did say a lot, but did not give full-fledged support to the Indo-Pacific for 3 different reasons. This is some of the reading I took from the Wang Yi's explanation. The first thing is that the concept of Indo-Pacific, China insists it was the Western construct because it forgot the whole in the middle Asia. So China wanted the word Asia in the middle. ASEAN did not accept it. Now, China said that we like to continue whatever that exists that promote cooperation in the region that is now the Asia Pacific. Secondly, China viewed that Indo-Pacific has no consensus. What is the geographical coverage of Indo-Pacific? The Japanese version, including West Coast of Africa. ASEAN is very clever. You know, we think the whole one package, you know, is out your own imagination, is one geographic, geostrategic area stretching to ocean. But the Chinese didn't like it because the Chinese saying that you did not mention Asia, you lack the continental component of Asia. Finally, the third one, I think there's a still gap of understanding. I think China, after more consultation, when the November East Asia Summit, I predict that China will have a new attitude that is more positive. And I think it surprised some of our ASEAN colleagues very much that China didn't say much, even though when ASEAN created the outlook, heart of ASEAN outlook is to make sure the so-called inclusivity that will including everyone. And I think this is the most important component. And as Dr. Pongphisoot had mentioned, other countries has already stepped in whatever pretext and framework. Japan has been the most advanced as step in. Japan, if you read carefully the Japanese versions of Indo-Pacific, it's quite comprehensive. The content and the scope is very similar to ASEAN, inclusive, all dimensional corporations. And I think Japan will benefit from ASEAN outlook the most because it has the most experience in engaging ASEAN in all areas. If you read carefully the Japanese version, and I would also suggest that of late, Japan did not want to use the word freedom too much as well. And it has translated the so-called strategy into vision. If you talk and discuss with some of the Japanese scholars, both in Tokyo and in this part of the world. So Japan also want its own Indo-Pacific that in line with ASEAN so that they can interface and synergize. And the word is synergize. And I think United States as well. We were very surprised actually that Pompeo came in and gave full support, saying that we have the same values and principles. That was correct. He mentioned all the right point. But in the end, the United States focus is much more on the strategic matter. But for the ASEAN is very encompassing. That I think I have taken up my time. I would like to end here. Thank you.
I'd just like to not let you off the hook right away with just one little question. As someone I know has read, one of the few people who has probably read the entire, like AOIP, FOIP, and the Japanese FOIP.
Yes.
Perhaps you could tell us what upsets China the most about FOIP as opposed to AOIP. Is it in the text, something that is constrained? No. Because as
it's in the
all
name.
of you point out,
it's in the name. No, it's in the name. That is unfortunate. Because Indo-Pacific, China's view as the Americans' framework that will frame the cooperation in the future. I think that was the misinterpretation, and I think a better appreciation. And I also, this is my own take. Pompeo came to ASEAN and said, "Oh, we are not here to make you choose sides," right? He said that again and again. But ASEAN never choose sides. But if they have to, they always lean toward America. And the way they pick on the Indo-Pacific concept was an indication. That is why I think China was unhappy. But in the end, if you read carefully, China will realize that you can interface and also synergize some of ongoing program, whether it is LMI. It's really unfortunate that China takes too much time. In ACMEC, it was the last country to jump into the sixth country of the first batch. Thailand thought that China would be the first. I think China feared that whatever it has done to the region will be marginalized, but that is not the case. It will actually increase the role of China because China will be able to have its tentacle in all these projects because China already has done some good job. As Dr. Pongphisoot has said, LMI was the most incredible project, South-to-South cooperation. Come on, within 3.5, 4 years. LMI.
You mean LMC, the Chinese one?
LMC, sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
Let's not get our LMIs, which
LMI
is US
is
and LMC.
Yeah, that was a disaster. Sorry. That was LMI, the American that tried to rejuvenate.
That's Lower Mekong Initiative.
Yeah, initiative, sorry.
LMC
so,
is
LMC,
Lanchang Mekong.
Lanchang Mekong Corporation or Mekong Lanchang Corporation, whichever point you want to use. The point here is China must, because China is now, has to understand, now that the Thai has laid out the plan, the ASEAN has laid out the plan, China has to choose. And I think China realized that all this scheme actually provide additional mechanism for them to play. It will not I would say it will not diminish China's roles in Lower Mekong in ACMEC. Actually, ACMEC is a very good mechanism that China will support, because in the end, with the leadership of the lower riparian country, they will come up with a norm that is acceptable to all, and that China will engage. And through this engagement, China will gain recognition even more and more, because Mekong now is a battlefield. It's a new one. It's no longer South China Sea, in my view. It's the new battleground in the mainland continental Southeast Asia.